Blake Lively is all smiles today because the judge has tossed out Justin Baldoni's lawsuit against her husband, her publicist, and the New York Times. Corruption. Hello, my fam. It is Perez, the queen of all media, the original influencer, and your number one source for everything It Ends With Us saga. I am working my way through the judge's ruling, trying to understand his thought process. In the video I posted just before this one, Judge Lyman said, yeah, she made threats against him, but she didn't break the law. Watch that video to be fully caught up. 7 of the 9 claims that Baldoni made against them and the other parties have been permanently tossed aside. Dismissed with prejudice. He can, if he files by June 23rd, submit a second amended complaint, but only for 2 of his initial 7 claims. Those are tortious interference with contract and breach of implied covenant. Not even what I thought 2 of his strongest claims were. So let's keep working our way through this ruling to try and get a clearer picture. Where we left off, similarly, the judge writes, with regard to Lively's refusal to attend the premiere with Baldoni, the Wayfarer parties do not allege that Lively had any obligation to attend the premiere with Baldoni. A refusal to provide that which one has no obligation to provide is not a threat, it is a bargaining position. Conclusory allegations are insufficient to plead a breach of contract and are therefore insufficient to plead that Lively threatened to breach her contract. Moreover, assuming the Wayfarer parties did plead that Lively refused to do that which her contract required her to do, that would not alone be sufficient to plead that such a refusal was wrongful and could support a claim for civil extortion. What? This judge is crazy! A threat to breach a contract may constitute a breach of contract or an anticipatory repudiation of a contract, but it is not of itself improper. It is not uncommon in commercial relationships that one or the other party will demand that a condition to their agreement change before performance is rendered. Additionally, the judge argues the facts presented by Baldoni and parties do not support an economic duress claim, meaning they were not financially impacted negatively by Lively's actions. This judge is ridiculous. This judge is ridiculous. Look at this. A little bit later, he writes, the Wayfarer parties first alleged that Lively threatened to stop acting in the film unless they agreed to her return to production demands. The court assumes, though it's not explicitly pleaded, that Lively had a contractual obligation to perform in the film. Is this judge What else do you hire an actor for? Even if she didn't sign her contract, she was hired to perform in the film. Ah! But the judge disagrees, saying the Wayfarer parties do not plead that she had an obligation to perform no matter the conditions on the set. And it is not unusual for employees to seek changes or improvements in workplace conditions. So she made her demands, and the judge says the only apparent cost to the Wayfarer parties was hiring an additional producer, which would not financially benefit Lively. The allegations do not support that Lively was attempting to extort the Wayfarer parties into hiring a producer, as opposed to seeking to confirm previously understood terms and conditions, or at worst, seeking slightly more favorable terms of employment. Even if they turn out to be unneeded, an employee can insist on protections at workplace for sexual harassment without being accused of extortion. If an employer exceeds, it cannot later claim to be a victim of the employee's wrongful threats. Baldoni and his production company did agree to her terms, to all the conditions that she stated, to return to filming. A similar result applies with respect to the Wayfarer party's allegations that Lively threatened to breach her contractual obligation to promote the film unless they allowed her to edit the movie and released her cut, gave her a producer credit, support her in seeking the PGA mark, and co-funded a screening of her version of the film. Y'all, this ruling is going to have huge ripples in show business, and perhaps needed. Contracts going forward are going to need to be very explicit. They're going to need to be some Blake Lively clauses. As an actor, you can and cannot do this, that, or the other. Holy moly. So, the judge, of her demands for editing control and getting a producer credit and everything else that she asked for, quote, "These demands do not involve a disproportionate exchange of value, as Lively insisted on taking on additional work for no additional pay." Wow. I am almost speechless. Corruption. I am so glad that we are reading all of this, because the mainstream media is glossing over the reasoning for the judge's ruling, and this is just crazy. Crazy. There is also no allegation that Lively had a contractual obligation to promote the film. She didn't sign the contract. If not, there is no basis to assume that the value that she conveyed in terms of her willingness to promote represented anything other than a fair trade for the Wayfarer party's willingness to use her cut. Her demands were related to the subject matter of the contract, as Lively sought to have the film she would be promoting fit her vision. Although the Wayfarer parties alleged that they did not believe Lively deserved a producer credit or PGA mark, they also alleged that Lively took over significant production responsibilities, stating that Lively used baseless sexual harassment allegations to assert unilateral control over every aspect of the production. The amended complaint alleges that Lively believed her version of the film to be better than the version favored by the Wayfarer parties, and that her efforts deserved recognition. The amended complaint is not clear whether the Wayfarer parties, as opposed to Sony, had the ultimate right to choose the cut of the film that would be distributed or the marketing plan that would be used to promote the film. There are indications from the amended complaint that such rights resided with Sony. If so, Lively would not have been withholding from the Wayfarer parties anything that the Wayfarer parties had a right to obtain from her in the first place. But even assuming that the Wayfarer parties had such a right as against Lively, they were not without a remedy. If in fact Lively announced that she would not perform unless the Wayfarer parties gave something of value to her which she was not entitled, the Wayfarer parties could have sued. They were not without a reasonable alternative to meet Lively's demands. Although the Wayfarer parties state that Baldoni was forced to choose between killing the film and his own career by insisting on his own creative vision and rights, at the point these threats were made, filming was complete. If the Wayfarer parties had the right to put out a film with Baldoni's edits in the first place, they were not without the ability to do so as a result of Lively's demands. So no extortion. And stay tuned for another video coming up.